just the other day a notice on my phone on Facebook that I've been a member of Facebook for 8 years. It's a long time. And that's also the year that Kade Hawkins started Prophecy Newswatch. Prophecy Newswatch is a site that has developed in the generation of Facebook and of social media, and I would imagine to a large extent has struggled with and benefited from that. So Kade, can you talk to us about what is unique about reporting prophecy in the news in our new age of social media, in our digital age?
Thank you, Rabbi Tooley. I want to thank Rabbi Tooley for inviting Prophecy Newswatch to this conference. We are essentially a Christianized version of Breaking Israel News. So it's a little bit like Coke and Pepsi getting together to create a new flavor. So I really do feel that's what we're doing here a little bit in our partnership. The news industry has a bad rap. Most people do not like to talk about the news because they feel it is bad news. It almost gives this idea of hopelessness. And to me, when you look at the uniqueness of prophecy news, it gives hope. Hope versus hopelessness. And that to me is a unique difference in how we approach the news. Is God still in control? That is the question that prophecy asks us. We'll look around the room. There's no way you would be here if God was not in control and the prophecy was not being fulfilled. So essentially, prophecy is looking at the promises of God, proclaiming God's word. And when you look at it in the context of his promises, it's good news. So forget what you've heard about bad news and re-examine how you approach the news. We've talked a little bit about the temple this morning and ascending the Temple Mount and eventually that hope of rebuilding the temple. The world looks at that event as negative. They're like, the Jews are causing trouble, and those who support those activities, that is controversial. That's something that should be considered that's bad. But when you look at it through God's eyes, through God's promises, that is something we can rejoice in. So those kinds of events, whether it's what's happening on the Temple Mount, or even if you want to personalize that, if God is in control of what's happening in Israel, on the Temple Mount, and if he's in control about these big world events, and this is for me really personalizing prophecy, is how much more is he in control of my individual life as well? That he has a purpose and a plan for Israel, but let's personalize that. He has a purpose and plan for you. And so as you learn about the scriptures and you listen to God, you'll find what that purpose is. But Israel's destiny, much of it is revealed in the scriptures, and so that's what we want to learn about. What makes prophecy unique as well is its ability to connect the past, the present, and the future. And that's one of the unique things that prophecy news does, whereas the news just kind of looks at things in the moment. Sometimes there's a bit of historical information, maybe a bit of speculation about where it may be going, but prophecy on a particular topic, such as Israel, we use that God-given insight to look at its past, we look at what's happening now in the present, and we know where it's going. So that unique ability to unite past, present, and future is something that makes prophecy news unique to us who study the scriptures. In Isaiah, God reveals that he declares the beginning from the end, things not yet that have been declared or not yet happened. And I thought a great way that we can help explain prophecy to people is with a parade. And this may be a poor example, but when you watch a parade on the ground, you watch it in a linear way. You watch event by event or float by float go by. It's very linear. Well, imagine if you were up in a helicopter. You would be looking down, you would see the beginning, the middle, and the end of that parade all at the same time. Now, that's not suggesting that God just is high up and so he sees everything happening at the same time, but that this is God's way of authenticating prophecy. God says, I see the beginning to the end. And so this authenticates that I am who I say I am. I know the beginning to the end. And so that's something unique about prophecy that, for me, built up my faith in the scriptures. When I realized that, oh, there's this prophecy about Israel becoming a nation, and lo and behold, it's a nation. That it would one day retake Jerusalem. It has Jerusalem unified. Well, there's some next steps regarding the Temple Mount, And we can be excited about those things because it authenticates that I am the one from the beginning and the end. I see all things, and we can rejoice in that. Now, those who study prophecy do see things differently. And I thought, how do we communicate that? That when you look at things through a biblical lens, you are looking at things differently. It's like putting on glasses. If you're nearsighted or farsighted, all of a sudden your vision becomes very clear or even more blind. There was an example done a couple years ago, I think by Hartford, or Stanford possibly, on the idea of perception blindness, how our perceptions can blind us. And there was an experiment done called the invisible gorilla. And I strongly encourage you to watch this video. Just type in invisible gorilla into YouTube, not now. And in this experiment, they have two teams, one dressed in black, one dressed in white. And the instructions are to watch the one team in black throw the basketball back and forth and count how many times they've passed the ball. And at the end of the video, you have your number, and the video asks you, did you count this number? And you'll say yes or no. But did you see the gorilla? And you're like, what? What do you mean? And they replay the video, and they show you the exact same video you just watched. And this time, when you're looking for the gorilla, you see someone walk out in a gorilla suit, beat their chest for 10 seconds, and walk off. But you never saw it. And most people who watch this video are absolutely astounded that they never saw the gorilla. And this reveals to us this idea of our perceptual blindness. What we're looking for can be very, very effective or affect in what we see. Now, on the flip side, the people who did see the gorilla couldn't believe that the people who didn't see it, how could you not see it? And to me, it really opened my eyes to when we look at things through a biblical lens, we see things that other people do not see. And we go, how could you not see that this is prophecy being fulfilled? And on the flip side, they look at us and go, what are you talking about? I don't see it. So for me, this was a great experiment for giving us, I think, some insight into how our perceptions, our biases affect what we see. Another issue I just wanted to address is the whole area of responsibility, especially when it comes to prophecy and speculation. I've had the opportunity to be in Israel here the last 2 weeks, and while I've been here, I've been reading the book of Ezekiel. And Ezekiel has some strong words for false prophets. And what he condemns them for is speaking from their heart. And I believe that the idea there, perhaps, is that they were very sincere in what they were speaking, but they still weren't speaking God's word. And I think many Christians, especially, are very sincere, and they get very excited, and sometimes over-sensationalize the promises of God, or we see something happening, and we want to jump ahead. A great example was during the Gulf War. I can't remember the amount of articles or books that came out speculating that the Gulf War was somehow tied to the prophecies of Babylon. And there was a lot of speculation about what this means. And so I think the heart may be sincere, but we need to take Ezekiel's words of warning to heart, in that if God has not spoken, don't presume to speak for him. Now, that being said, being in the prophecy news world, I do believe it's all right to ask questions. I think we do need to ask those questions. We're told to watch, and so we need to ask, well, what are we supposed to be watching for? We need to search the scriptures and to ask those questions, but don't presume upon God with the answer. So that would be my kind of caution on the responsibility of prophecy. Just another observation on the effect of the digital era. Most of us are overwhelmed with information. How do we filter the news that we receive? There's so much. The U.S. elections, it burnt most people out of the U.S. Most people took Facebook holidays, wanted nothing to do with the news. But we're still overloaded with news. And my observation has been that people's ability to pay attention to the news has shifted from reading longer articles to shorter articles to just reading the headlines now. And I think many of us are guilty of that we're so busy, give me the headline. But you know what? The headline doesn't tell the whole story. And so my recommendation to you is go beyond the headlines
when you see something that you think you understand or know, dig a little deeper, look into some additional sources, and make sure that you have a knowledge that's not just shallow. Because I think most people have a very shallow knowledge of what's happening because they've just read the headlines and haven't really researched what's happening. Lastly, just want to address the fake news issue, just because I'm starting to see a bit of a shift in what is classified as fake news. The terrible London terror attacks this week have started a new term, which I think you're going to hear this as a new buzzword, and the leader of the UK has now called for the world to unite and to regulate the news. So it's an interesting shift between fake news and regulate the news. And my question in addressing this idea of regulating the news, who determines what's regulated? There was a story a while back with Facebook in that they have that trending section on Facebook that decides what is trending. And conservatives found that many of their issues were never trending, or if they were, it was in a very negative light. And they had some Facebook employees who actually came forward and said, yeah, we bury certain sources that don't fit our narrative. So when the powers that be decide to regulate what you see, we should be concerned. So I just want to bring that to your attention when you're looking at the issue of fake news. You're now going to hear about regulated news and to be on guard against that. And perhaps a statement to throw at you, a catchphrase that will remind you of this issue is, who watches? Oh, wow, I'm realizing you may have not heard a lot of what I said. A little phrase to help you remind you of this issue is, who watches the watchers? Who watches the watchers? And who decides what is fake news? Recently there are very good reasons for exposing some things that are fake news. But one of the shifts I've slowly started to see with fake news as well is they're not just going after misinformation, but they're going after propaganda. Now, when we see incitement by the Palestinians about killing Jews, we go, yes, that needs to be taken off. But on the flip side, also be careful that the UN, for example, the numerous regulations that have come against Israel, if bodies such as the UN start to determine, well, what is fake news and what is propaganda? Oh, you who are supporting a united Jerusalem, that's propaganda. We need to regulate that. And so be on guard against some of those things that are happening in the media, and that's one of the shifts I'm seeing as far as the digital age to pay attention to. Thank you.
That's really fascinating. Kade, thank you for that summary. Thanks a lot.